tips and tricks, we're going to talk about being a good friend and some friendship goals that you should have. So, with being a good friend, actions speak louder than words. What do our actions say about our friends? So, actions are the things that we do, and they're the things that we say. And so, our actions speak louder than our words, meaning what we do means more than what we say we're gonna do, right? So, we're gonna review the list below and decide whether or not each action goes with being a good friend or not a good friend. So, normally, we would take this little phrase and we would decide is it good friend or not a good friend, and then we would write it under there. But since it'd be kind of hard for me to write, I'm going to highlight in green if it is a good friend and red if it's not a good friend. Okay, so let's start with this one. We'll start on the bottom and work our way up. So tapping someone's shoulder repeatedly. If it's repeatedly, sometimes when you tap someone's shoulder, you're trying to get their attention, right? And that's understandable. But if you're doing it over and over and over again, that might get kind of annoying, right? So do we think that's a good friend or not a good friend? Probably not a good friend, right? So we go over to red. Whoa, big box. There we go. Yes, so tapping someone's shoulder repeatedly, not a good friend, because that's kind of annoying, and if you really need to get someone's attention, you can wait, right? So that brings us to this one, waiting your turn. Waiting your turn. Do we think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Are you being a good friend if you're waiting, or not a good friend? Probably good friend, right? So we'll switch to our green. Highlight it in our green. It's good to wait your turn. If you're constantly fighting about whose turn it is, you're probably fighting a lot, and that's not a very good friendship, right? Yeah. What about smiling? How do you feel when someone smiles at you? Does it make you smile too? It makes me feel really nice inside when people smile at me. So do you think smiling is a good friend behavior or not a good friend behavior? I think it's a good friend behavior because it makes you feel good when people smile at you. What about listening? If you're listening to your friend, if they're having a rough day and they're telling you about it and you're listening to them, is that a good friend behavior or not good friend behavior? It's a good friend behavior, right? Because if you're listening, it's showing them that you care about them. If you ignored them, it would show them that you don't care. Okay, using a loud voice. Using a loud voice. If someone says something to you in a normal voice and then you yell back at them, is that a good friend behavior or not a good friend behavior? Probably not, right? Let's switch to our red. And it's probably not because you could hurt their ears. Now, if they have a hard time hearing and they ask you to use a loud voice, then it would be a good friend behavior. But we're going to go with a bad friend behavior because not everyone has trouble hearing. Okay, what about yelling? That kind of goes along with using a loud voice, right? If we're yelling, we're probably not being a very good friend. I don't like being yelled at, right? Not many people do. Okay, what about interrupting? If your friend is telling you about their bad day, or they're telling you about their exciting birthday party, or the things that they got for Christmas, and you interrupt them and you say, oh, well, what about me? Is that being a good friend, or is that not a good friend? Probably not a good friend, right? We want to wait our turn instead of interrupting. Absolutely. What about grabbing? What do you think about grabbing? If someone is eating pizza and you grab it from them, is that good? Probably not, right? It's probably not a good thing at all. I'd be pretty upset if someone grabbed my things without asking. Okay, What about using praise? Praise is kind of a hard word. Praise means that someone's saying, like, good job, or you did it, or you did really great. So those compliments, those good things they say. So is using praise being a good friend or not a good friend? Good friend, right? If we're using praise, we're probably making that person feel really good inside. Absolutely. Alright, what about giving a thumbs up? What do you think giving a thumbs up? Is that good or bad? So if you give someone a thumbs up, it means that you're proud of what they're doing, right? You think they're doing a good job. I think it's a good friend, right? Yeah. Probably making them feel good. Just like using praise. Giving a thumbs up is a form of using praise. Yep. What about saying, excuse me? Instead of just pushing someone aside or interrupting, if we say, excuse me, is that being a good friend or not a good friend? Probably a good friend, right? I think it would be a good friend. I'd rather someone say excuse me than interrupt. What about making noises? So if I'm trying to tell you something and you're making funny noises, is that being a good friend or not a good friend? It's kind of like interrupting, right? Making noises could be like interrupting. So we're going to switch to red. And we're going to say that's not a good friend. Not a good friend. What about being patient? What about being patient? If you're waiting your turn, or you're waiting for something to happen, they're a good friend, not a good friend. It's a good friend, right? Because that's just like the waiting your turn. They're kind of similar. Invading space. What do we think about that one? Especially now during COVID, invading space can be kind of difficult, right? Difficult to deal with. You might feel a little bit more pressured. Yeah. So invading space, is that good or bad? Probably a bad feeling, right? Probably not a very good friend if someone's invading your space without your permission. Now, if you give them permission to invade your space, then that's a little different. If someone asks to hug you and you say yes, then they're not really invading your space. But if they just come up and hug you without your permission, then it's invading space. What about using a quiet voice? Using a quiet voice. So if we're thinking using a loud voice is not a good friend, using a quiet voice probably is a good friend, right? Now again, if you're hard of hearing and you ask your friends to speak up and they still use a quiet voice, then it would be probably not a good friend, right? But we're gonna say it is a good friend because they're not yelling at you. Okay, so we have let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 not good friend. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the good friend. So you would want to put your good friend words, phrases over here, and your not good friend phrases over here, and there's one more good friend than there is not good friend. So you would see the good outweighs the bad, right? So it's important to remember that you want to set a goal for yourself to have more good in your friends than you do not good, right? Because if someone's making you feel not good, then maybe you shouldn't really be their friend. Yeah. So I want you guys to think about your friends. Think about if they make you happy. Do they make you happy? Or do they make you sad? I think we all want to be happy, right? So let's try to be happy. Have a good week, and I hope that you have some good friends that are making you happy. Bye!